Hey Amarillo. I'm Skylar Gallup, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo. It's the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. We record each week at the beautiful offices of Rosenbach Contractors. They're experts in high-end design and construction, creating stunning and functional spaces through both new builds and remodels. Today's guest is Mike Pacino, and he tells us the story of Cal Farley's Boys Ranch. He's worked there for decades. We talk about the Native Americans who battled over this land first, through Tascosa and its founding, gunfights and cattle rustling. I learned quicksand is a real thing around here. And we go into what we now know as the incredibly impactful Boys Ranch. Mike offers a great retelling of the Western spirit, the cowboy way, and how our history and culture influence us today. Here's Mike. Mike Pacino, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast.
Thank you.
I'm excited about the conversation. We like to begin at the beginning with the very difficult question of where are you from? What was your childhood like, Mike?
Well, I was born in Santa Ana, California, back in 1956, and lived all over the state of California. My dad was an operating engineer, so we traveled with him until my mom got real tired of us going from one school to another, and we settled down in Northern California, about 50 miles north of Sacramento. And my dad continued to work all over the country, all over the world, actually. But we got to stay we lived out in the country. We had the 360-acre little ranch, and in California, that'll take care of as many cattle as 5,000 acres out in West Texas, but was raised there, graduated from Oroville High School in 1974, married my wife, Sandy, in 1976. We had gone to school together, started up in a little mountain school up in the mountains of Northern California. We only had 9 kids in our class in the 4th grade. So I've known her since the 4th grade. We went through high school together, got married 2 years after high school, after our 2nd year of college, and then we moved to Texas.
Yeah, what prompted the Texas move?
Well, I'd taken a job in Walnut Creek, California, and they had a job out in Ohio, and they were rebuilding bridges. And so I went to work for them, and my wife, Sandy, came out. We had a little trailer, and we stayed at a KOA camp while I was working out there. Our plan was to, after the summer was over, come back to Northern California and go to our junior year of college, right? But the job lasted longer, and it paid really well. So I stayed longer, and so we missed the first semester, right? So instead of coming back to California, we decided to go down and visit my sister, who's 12 years older than I am. She lived in Amarillo, Texas. She'd been stolen from our family in California by a Texan, and they lived in Amarillo. So we went down to visit on our way home, and we never left.
You never left?
Never left.
Because you loved it, or?
Well, my brother-in-law talked us into staying the winter. He said, you've already missed your, the school, so get a job, get a place, rent a place, and see what you think. And you can go back to California when school starts next year. And that was the plan. We didn't. And it's mainly because I got a really good job with a company called Ponca Wholesale. It was a 4-state 33 warehouse operation, but it headquartered in Amarillo. And I was an auditor with them and got to travel all 33 warehouses in 4 states and loved it. But we stayed. My wife went to work for the subsidiary of Ponca Wholesale, which was Standard Cigarette. They had vending machines.
Okay.
And so we stayed and wound up buying a new house, building a new house, and then Ponca Wholesale was sold. And I took a job at Boys Ranch at the Amarillo office. And it was mainly because they needed somebody who knew how to operate an IBM AS400 mainframe, which they had just gotten brand new. They'd never had a computer before 1987, Boys Ranch, and not in the Amarillo office, not out at the ranch. And they'd just taken over Girlstown, USA, out west of Lubbock, and they had a computer system. So what they needed was somebody to help get the accounting, payroll, all that kind of stuff on the mainframe in Amarillo, and then go to Girlstown, learn their system, bring it back and integrate it in with this one. So that's what I did the first year with Boys Ranch, and we still lived here in Amarillo. And a job opened up out at Boys Ranch, the business manager. I applied for it, got it. We moved out there in 1989. I had, at that time, 5 kids. We raised 6 out there that graduated from out there. But yeah, our first child was born in 1983, Benjamin, but he passed away at birth. And I'm in the process right now of moving his grave from Llano Cemetery to Boys Ranch, because that's where my wife and I are going to be buried, is out at the Boys Ranch Cemetery. And then Christopher was born in 84. Coco was born in 86. We took custody of Terry and Aaron, and they were, Aaron was 5, Terry was 12. They were our niece and nephew from California. We took custody of them. And then Joe Ben was born in 1990 while we lived out of Boys Ranch. And then Andrew, we adopted in 2000, but we had him from the time he was 3 years of age. We got him in 1998 and then adopted him in 2000. So I had one graduate high school in 1994 and my last one in 2014. But we were lucky. We were out at Boys Ranch, which was a wonderful place to raise our kids.
Yeah. So early on, I have a question. It sounds like when you kind of found yourself with an opportunity at Boys Ranch, like maybe it was a perfect combination of your upbringing on a small ranch in California combined with some technical knowledge that the ranch needed at the time.
Right. No, it was perfect for me. And the other thing, I loved history, and I was just getting into kind of the history of the Texas Panhandle. Because if you're from Northern California, the history is rich. You know, the gold rush, and I loved that. So when I came out to Texas, well, guess what? When you finish college in Texas, if you haven't taken Texas history or Texas government, and you wouldn't have in California, you have to take it in college. If you didn't take it in high school and you haven't had it in college, you have to take it in college.
Oh, that's
so
smart.
I had to take Texas history and Texas government, and I fell in love with Texas history. I mean, it's awesome. It is why Texas is what Texas is. Mm-hmm. And when we moved out to Boys Ranch and found out it's sitting on the old ghost town of Tascosa, I mean, right on top of it. In fact, our apartment there is where my living room is where 3 men died in the big gunfight at Tascosa in 1886, which kind of piqued my interest even more into learning more about Boys Ranch. So probably 20% of the tours I do out at Boys Ranch, and I've done thousands of them, have been historical tours. In fact, I did one last night. Some folks were traveling through from Oklahoma and California and wanted to know the history of Old Tascosa because they'd read a little bit about it.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I come to the table too. I know a little bit about it, and one of the things that I was really excited about visiting with you about is to learn more about it. So, if you wouldn't mind, can you kind of tell me that story? Tell me that history?
Well, it's of course it depends on how much of the history of the Texas Panhandle you know, because for 500 years there was a Puebloan group of Indians that lived in the Texas Panhandle. And until the Apaches got on horseback after their revolt from the Spanish in Santa Fe, they got on horseback and everything, they moved down into the plains where the buffalo herds were because now they were on horseback. You can't hunt buffalo on foot, I'm sorry. So
yeah, they're fast when they want to be.
And they're dangerous. So they came down into the plains from New Mexico and totally annihilated the Puebloan Indians. They're gone. I mean, nobody knows anybody who has any history or lineage with those people. And the Apaches settled in here, and of course, about the same time, the Spanish and Mexican governments were in Texas, East Texas, and the Apache were raiding down there continually. And that's one of the reasons that I love this part of it. That's one of the reasons that the Mexican government, which was still Spanish at the time, was inviting all of the people from the U.S., from Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, to come into East Texas and settle us because they really needed somebody to protect that area of Texas from the Apaches raids that were happening because there weren't 5,000 Mexican people living in Texas at the time. They needed more people there. And so they brought in all these people from Texas, and they had ranches and everything. Of course, you know the story of Cynthia Ann Parker, and the Parker Ranch was raided, and she was taken captive. But
Juana Parker's mother.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So you had the Apache that were still raiding down there, and then the Texas Rangers come into being to protect the frontier, which back then the frontier was probably about where Brady and Jacksboro, some of those areas are way down southeast of us. But then something else happened. Those horses that got away from the Spanish when the Apaches and the Navajos revolted, some of them got going up the Rocky Mountain chain and wound up with a band of Shoshone Indians called the Comanche. Mm-hmm. Those people were from kind of the plains area of Wyoming, but they got on horseback. Now, prior to having horses, they were a poverty-stricken, berry-eating group of people. They were very, very poor. Mm-hmm. They get horses. They're rich. Now they can go down and hunt buffalo. They got hides. They got bone. They got meat. Everything.
Transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they became extremely good horsemen because of the hunting practices they had. They were having to do it with lances. You're not going to bring down too many buffalo with bow and arrows, but you had to lance them and bleed them to death as they're running. So the Comanche became extremely good on horseback, where you're thinking, well, why weren't the white settlers coming in that good? Because they didn't hunt like that. They had rifles. They shot from a distance. They never had to ride at a gallop alongside a herd of buffalo. That makes you either a good rider or dead. So you became a good rider. So the Comanche moved down, and guess what they found? In the Texas Panhandle, where the southern bison herd was, which was to them just money in the bank, they found the Apache. Well, the Apache were a little more sedentary. They set up camps. They lived in camps all over the West Texas. Well, the Comanche were moving all the time. They didn't have that problem. So they found out it was real easy to go in and wipe out one camp after another of the Apache. And they finally drove what was left of the Apaches, Mescaleros, into New Mexico, and the Lipan Apaches down into Mexico, and the Comanche took over. And now they were mean. They weren't just good horsemen. They were mean. Everybody was their enemy, and they loved to torture their enemies. Anything you've ever seen on TV about or read about where they're staking them on ant beds or burning them alive, that was a Comanche.
Wow.
They were mean.
Wow.
So when they started raiding, that was a little different story. That's how they'd go in, and when they'd raid a ranch or a town, they would kill all the men. They tortured them if they could, but they'd kill them as fast as they could. And then they'd take the women and children captives. Sure. And most of what they did with them was trade them to another group of people over from New Mexico called Comancheros. And one of the Comanchero trading places, if you drive out to Boys Ranch and you hit the end of Ranch to Market 1061, it dead ends into Highway 385. There's a hill there that's shaped like a saddle. It's called Saddle Mountain. That was a Comanchero trading point.
Oh, that's my favorite. That's one of my favorite formations.
Yep, and that's where that was a Comanchero.
So that was a trading. That's so interesting to know.
Because it's easy to see.
It's an iconic formation.
Yeah, so they would meet there and they would trade. Well, the Comancheros would take women and children and trade them in slavery down into Mexico. But they'd give the Comanche what they wanted, which was weapons, ammunition, alcohol, any other kind of goods they needed.
Sure.
So that was a trade that kind of kept the Comanche going in what they were doing. Well, after the Civil War was over, and this is what's really piqued me about the Panhandle of Texas, it was 11 years after the Civil War was over before there were any European people of European descent settled in the Texas Panhandle. That's 11 years after the Civil War. California was a state, Texas was a state, everybody else was a state around us. We were the largest area and the last large area in the continental United States settled by European settlers. And so
I've always found that really fascinating as well. And I think it's important to know that about our place, our land.
It tells you a lot about why the towns are not any older than they are. Because the earliest were 1876. That was Mobeetie, Tascosa, and Clarendon. Clarendon was a Methodist colony. Mobeetie was set up as a town to support Fort Elliott. And then Tascosa came into being because the Comancheros were the first people to realize, they had to be, that the Comanche were gone because that was who they traded with. But they were also the people who knew what was in the Texas Panhandle. They knew the Canadian River flowed through there. There was water, there's springs coming into it, creeks all up and down, great grazing. So one of the Comancheros by the name of Casimiro Romero moved down from Mora, New Mexico with 6,000 head of sheep, all his family, all his other livestock, and moved down into the Canadian River Valley. And so did a lot of the other pastores at the time coming down the Canadian River. And Casimiro Romero settled in the Tascosa area and becomes the founder of Tascosa. But there are Mexican plazas all the way up and down the Canadian River, and one of the finest is only about 3 miles west or east of Boys Ranch. It's on the XL Ranch, and it's the Sandoval Romero Sandoval Plaza. And there are stacked stone walls, still a quarter mile of them out there in this Corsina Creek. And why they abandoned it, I don't know, but because they didn't stay there very long, it must have been because the creek dried up. They were dependent on that water. The water comes out of a spring, flows for about a half mile, then disappears into the sand.
Yeah.
But they settled right there where the water was above ground, and it had to have dried up. So then Romero decided to stay in the Tascosa area, which there's lots of water coming out of the ground there still today.
Yeah. There's still a bunch of water on Boys Ranch?
Yeah, Tascosa Creek still flows.
Nice.
We've got ponds that are filled by springs. There's a lot of water underground. We've
Lovely.
got an ocean of water under our part of the Texas Panhandle.
Yeah.
We have the Docum Aquifer, which nobody else except us and the Lit Ranch and some of the other ranches down the Canadian River draw any water out of. But that can't be. Boys Ranch has to be 90% of the draw on that, and we haven't made a dent in it in 60 years. We started drawing out of it in 1956, and it hadn't dropped but a few inches, and it's 90 feet deep. So we've got lots of water.
Yeah.
But Tascosa started in 1876. Of course, the Comanche were put on reservations in 1874 at the end of the Red River Wars. And if you ever get a chance to, Sam Harrell, the Harrell Ranch, looks right down on the space where that battle was, the last battle that Mackenzie came down with the troops into the Palo Duro Canyon and rounded up and if you don't know the story, killed close to 1,400 horses up Tool Creek Canyon. But the Harrell home looks right down the canyon at that site.
Wow.
Yeah, it's neat. And I'm probably going to get in trouble by Sam by telling everybody that, but that is a neat place to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the
Comanches are gone.
Comanches are gone.
Comancheros come in.
They come in, and Charles Goodnight's up in Pueblo, Pueblo wasn't there, but he was in the Pueblo area, and he'd been through the Texas Panhandle, of course, fighting Indians. He was a Texas Ranger, and he's the one who actually went and
liberated Quanah's mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether she wanted to or not.
Right. Yeah, that's a problematic word to say, actually. Thank you.
Well, she needed to be liberated because they were going to either kill all those people or put them on a reservation. So
history is complicated
sometimes. It is, but, I honestly believe had the Comanche been happy just to stay in the Texas Panhandle, this would probably be one of the largest Indian reservations in the country. Because East Texans didn't want anything to do with this part of the country. Put on they're sitting
it's
down.
very different. Yeah, they got trees and water.
Well, they're sitting down there 1,000 foot to zero to sea level, and their weather's pretty stable, hot and humid. And they come up this Texas Panhandle to nearly 4,000 feet, and what'd they see? Nothing.
Sure.
They either saw the wind blowing 50 miles an hour from the south or 50 miles an hour from the north, 5 below, 105 above. They had no desire to be up here. So I honestly believe that the Comanche had worked out a treaty and and the federal government put in a Comanche reservation. This would be one of the largest in the country. The towns, Tascosa, Mobeetie, and of course, Clarendon being a Methodist colony, Mobeetie supporting Fort Elliott, Tascosa was supporting all the big ranches that came in. Of course, Charles Goodnight came into the Palo Duro and started the J.A. Ranch, and William Lee started the L.S. Ranch that was south of the Canadian River, but he claimed 1.3 million acres, didn't own a blade of grass, but he claimed 1.3 million acres, and then the Lit Ranch was there, and the area that, if you look at a map, that they were claiming was nearly 500,000. The L.E. was up north, it was nearly 500,000. So they were surrounded by these big ranches, these guys that came in that were being...
And they were just staking them out and saying, this is mine, right?
Yeah, there were no fences. It was open range.
Yeah.
And open range, you could do that, but you didn't own it. Anybody could actually graze it. And that had a lot to do with the history of Tascosa because without any fences, every time you do a roundup, right, and you go round up the cows, you always rounded up, your roundup was before the calves were weaned because the calves were not weaned, they were staying with the cow.
Gotta keep them together, yeah.
Because the cow was branded. You knew what brand belonged on that calf by the cow. So when the LS would do a roundup, they might be rounding up LIT cattle or LE cattle. And they carried those other two ranches' brands with them because if the cow had a lit brand on it, they put a lit brand on the calf. I mean, they had to take care of each other that way because there was no fences.
Sure.
And then they try to run those cows and calves back into their local area. But that caused a problem because with no fences and they not owning the land, there was a practice of branding maverick calves. Maverick calves are calves that after the roundups are over, a cowboy would run across a calf out there that's not branded, that's weaned. Nobody knew who it belonged to. It belonged to whoever put their brand on it first. So a cowboy would put his personal brand on there. And that was kind of his little retirement plan because they only made $25 a month. That wasn't much. I mean, they'd spend that in town in a heartbeat. So when William Lee got tired of it, the owner of the LS Ranch, they outlawed the branding of maverick calves.
Okay.
The cowboys all knew this was coming, so they'd been saving up money because they went on strike. And their strike paperwork, they wrote up a document, is in the closed Panhandle Plains Museum, and it stated that they needed $50. If they were going to not be able to brand maverick calves, they needed $50 a month. Good cooks needed $50 a month, and foremen needed $75 a month, and then some other things about horse ownership. And they went on strike because William Lee said, we're not going to honor this. And they went on strike on March 1st, 1883, because the roundup was coming up. And they thought, they can't do the roundup without us. They'll meet our needs.
Okay.
They didn't. The ranches got through the roundup by bringing in more cowboys from South Texas who were in trouble with the law and needed a place to hide, and their foremen. And they went out and did their own roundup, and they didn't need all those cowboys, and they weren't going to hire them back. Well, those cowboys, where did they go when they went on strike? Tascosa. They had money. They'd been saving up for 3-4 months. There was saloons, there was gambling, there were ladies. They went to town. Townspeople loved them because they were spending all their money.
Sure.
The townspeople got to where they were supporting the cowboys and the little bitty ranch guys that had branded enough maverick calves to have their own little herd. And they got kind of crossways with the big ranchers and the foremen on those ranches. They needed them for business, and the ranches needed the town for supplies, so they kind of got along with it. But for 3 years after that strike was over, bad blood. I mean, a lot of bad blood. Well, right after the strike was over, William Lee decided, hey, these cowboys that we just fired are going to be rustling cattle right and left. So he hires Pat Garrett, who had killed Billy the Kid 2 years earlier, and hires him to come in and deputize all those foremen as Texas Rangers. Now, the state of Texas wouldn't allow them to be just Texas Rangers, where they were a ranger statewide. They were called home rangers. They could only enforce what a Texas Ranger could in their local areas.
Oh.
And Pat Garrett was going to take them out, and they were going to go out. And Pat Garrett, think about this. You know what the gun laws in Texas are today?
Today, like open carry, or you have to have a
Essentially,
license?
there aren't any.
Okay.
There's 2 rules. You have to be 18, and you can't be a felon.
Okay.
That's the rules. And it can't be a machine gun. It has to, So, but Pat Garrett in 1883, late 83, 84, early 84, got the state of Texas to outlaw the outward carrying of guns. You couldn't just carry a gun on yourself. That's unbelievable. In the Old West, in Texas, they outlawed the carrying of a gun.
Well, I'm thinking about the movie Tombstone, and they outlawed it like in their town.
In the
and
town.
That's why they deputized all of the Herb brothers. So this was just like anywhere.
Texas.
Wow.
And
that is wild to think that it would have floated.
It is, but there is a piece of clothing that came into being during that time that you see today on cowboys. Has nothing to do with being Western, I don't think. The cowboys said, well, if we can't carry this gun out in the open, we're going to start carrying it right here. So they started wearing a vest. And there was, people in the East wore vests all the time. Well, you could wear a vest because in the summertime you weren't wearing a coat. And in the wintertime you could just keep it on when you went into a building. You still had it, but they were carrying these guns under their shoulder holsters. And because they weren't going to be deprived of a gun.
No.
So that's the reason that piece of clothing came into. Yeah.
So Pat Garrett was responsible for that.
He was.
Or part of it, whatever, yeah.
But when he went out with these foremen who were now Texas Rangers and was trying to enforce the laws and make sure these guys weren't rustling cattle, those foremen were roughing these guys up. In fact, they would take a guy who had legally branded maverick calves and they try to run him off and get the calves back. And Pat Garrett was a lawman, and he didn't like any of this. He didn't like the rough-handed way that the foremen were handling these other cowboys. So he quit, and he went on to Las Vegas. But for 3 years, boy, there was a lot of bad blood between those cowboys, the town, and the big ranches.
Yeah.
So 3 years after the strike's over, March 20th, 1886, 4 LS foremen who were previous, those Texas Rangers, were riding bog east of Tascosa, or west of Tascosa on the Canadian River. And riding bog is pulling calves and cows out of quicksand.
Thank you. I was going to ask.
Nasty job in the
Ooh.
wintertime, and it was March.
Real quicksand?
Yeah, we have real quicksand. I've watched pickups go under. I've watched motorcycles, mine will go under.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so there's quicksand. So cows and calves would get stuck in that, and they'd ride the Canadian River and pull them out. That was their job. It's called riding bog.
Okay.
Well, a cowboy had been riding by and told him that Casimiro Romero was going to have a baile at his house that night. Now, that's a dance. They were going to dance. So they rode through Tascosa, coming in from the west, rode east over to about a quarter mile away to Casimiro Romero's house and went to the dance. Dance finished at midnight.
Okay.
After midnight, they came back into Tascosa to do a little gambling and drinking.
Nothing good happens after midnight.
Nope. Now it's March 21st, 1886. The 4 of them right up in front of the Exchange Hotel, which sits catty corner across from the headquarters at Boys Ranch. It used to. And tethered their horses there. 2 of them went into the Equity Bar. That was Frank Valley and Fred Chilton. The other 2, Ed King and John Lang, stood out in front of the Exchange Hotel talking to dance hall girl Sally Emery.
Okay.
Ed was sweet on her, right? But so was Lem Woodruff across the street, who was the bartender of the Dunn and Jenkins Saloon. Lem Woodruff was already kind of thinking he was her boyfriend. And been sweet on her for quite a while. So, and he hates Ed King. I mean, these guys hated each other because one's from town, one's from the ranch. Well, Lem Woodruff's sitting out on the front porch, and he sees Ed King putting his arms all over Sally Emery, and he calls Ed King's name out. Now, this is after midnight. There's no lights in Tascosa. Ed King knows the name because they hate each other. He walks across the street. Rifle shot goes off. He gets hit in the middle of the face and falls flat on his back in the middle of the street. Then Lem Woodruff walks out of the shadows of the front porch of the Dunn and Jenkins Saloon, puts his Winchester up against Ed's throat and finishes him off.
Okay.
John Lang and Sally Emery see this. John Lang runs into the Equity Bar and says, he's killed Ed. He's killed Ed. And they come running out because they know exactly who they're talking about. They run toward the Dunn and Jenkins Saloon across the street, firing their guns at it. It's an adobe building with a front door that's wood that thick. They know they're not getting through there, but it drives Lem Woodruff back into the building. Lem Woodruff always has his friends in there, and that's Charlie Emery, the sister or the brother of Sally.
Okay.
It's the Catfish Kid, John Go, Lewis the Animal Bozeman. These are guys that are his friends, and they're always in there with him. Well, these guys know it. These 3 guys running toward the last 3, Ed King's friends, come running toward the building. They know all those guys are in there, and they're thinking, okay, if we run in that front door, they're going to pick us off and shoot us, right? Because the saloons were probably no wider than from this wall to that wall and long.
Yeah.
So they thought they'd get picked
25
off.
by 70 or something, yeah.
Right. Well, Lem Woodruff and his buddies are sitting in there thinking, they run through that front door, they're going to shoot us to pieces. So guess what all of them did? The guys from the outside ran around to the back of the Dunn and Jenkins Saloon. The guys inside ran out the back of the Dunn and Jenkins Saloon, and they meet back there in the dark, and there's big wood piles back there and everything. And Frank Valley sees Lem Woodruff come out that door, shoots him twice, once in the stomach, once in the upper leg. He falls back into the Dunn and Jenkins Saloon and kicks the door shut. He's hurt. Frank Valley kicks the door open. He's going to finish him off. But he forgets Lem Woodruff has a Winchester, and boom, he hits Frank Valley under the left eye, and he falls dead. Now, in all this commotion, the storekeeper next door, who was from Ohio, just came into Tascosa with his family. He hears all the commotion. He walks out behind the Dunn and Jenkins Saloon to see what's going on, and he catches a bullet, and he dies.
Oh.
Then the Catfish Kid gets off a lucky shot in the dark and hits Fred Chilton dead center, and he dies. Now you got 4 people laying on the ground dead.
Just a mess.
All happens in about 45 seconds.
Sure.
Well, Sheriff Jim East and his deputy, Charlie Pierce, they hear this commotion. They're across the street. They come trotting over there. Well, everybody who's involved in this takes off in the dark. Even Lem Woodruff, shot twice, takes off in the dark. John Lang, the one guy that's left of the 4 that came into town that night, runs back to the Equity Bar. So after Sheriff East and Deputy Pierce look the situation over, they head over to the equity bar to see if anybody knows what the heck happened. There's 4 people laying there dead. Nobody else is in the, well, there were 2 people still in the Dunn & Jenkins saloon. But they go over there and they talk to John Lang. Well, of course, he's going to tell them his side of the story. They go ahead and arrest him, charge him with murder. The next day, next daylight, still the same day, March 21st, they arrest everybody else they find them.
Okay.
And charge them all with murder.
Yeah.
They're all taken to Clarendon to be tried, hung jury. So then they decide, well, we're not satisfied with this. They take them to Mobeetie.
Okay. Try
They're
again.
acquitted. They're all acquitted.
Okay.
Yeah, because the jury of their peers was probably good friends of theirs.
Yeah.
So yeah, nobody spent any time in jail other than between trials. Spent any time in jail, and the trials happened pretty quick. So anyway, the interesting thing about that is the back end of the Dunn & Jenkins saloon is right where my living room is. And that's what really got me started into that kind of history of Tascosa. And there's all kinds of stories in Tascosa. It had a suburb called Hogtown. And that's actually where Casimiro Romero's home was, but that was kind of a tent city on the other side of a hill. And when people want a tour, I tell them the difference between Tascosa and Hogtown, which was called Lower Tascosa by those people, was that the decent prostitutes and gamblers hung out in Tascosa and the indecent prostitutes and gamblers hung out at Hogtown. It was so bad that Sheriff Jim East and Cape Willingham and all of those guys who were sheriff wouldn't go over there. They were not the law for that area, and they didn't want any part of it. And people were shot and just dragged down to the river, and their bodies left. I mean, it was bad. It was as bad. The only place I can think of in the United States, in the history of the United States, that was that bad was the gold fields of Northern California, when all those thousands and thousands of guys showed up, and those little shanty towns were started up there in the mountains. There was no law. People people were shot over claims or shot over gold in their hand. And, it was that bad.
Yeah. Does your marketing feel like a shot in the dark? Are your social media posts getting lost in the scroll? Unlock your business's potential with SKP Creative. They know your audience and design posts that reflect your brand and drive real engagement. From scroll-stopping social media content to powerful traditional marketing, graphic design, and website development, SKP Creative covers it all. Are you ready to elevate your feed and turn your marketing into a success story? Visit skpcreative.com today. Can you help me understand how long was Tascosa like a town?
18.
And then also like how big was it in its largest time? Like how many people?
It probably had as many as 300 people in it at one time. But it was small. I mean, if you know where Tascosa Creek is when you enter the campus of Boys Ranch, and then the courthouse, which was built in 1884, is still there. That was the eastern edge of town. The western edge of town was just beyond the creek. So it was, you're talking about 150 yards long, the main street. And there was some buildings back behind those buildings, but it wasn't very many buildings.
And then what were the years?
1876.
Okay.
The courthouse stayed, the Oldham County Courthouse, till 1915. Actually, when it was closed, when the people of Vega, which was the major population of Oldham County, got tired of taking a day trip down to the river just to find out they couldn't cross the river, because if it rained in New Mexico, the river was too wide to cross. Didn't matter what was happening in the Texas Panhandle. They'd make a trip all the way down there and figure out that they had to turn around and go back. Just to do legal business, they had to be at the courthouse, and there was no bridge, so they decided to build their own courthouse in Vega. And then one night they just came and took all the records from the Oldham County Courthouse in Tascosa to Vega. Well, the people in Tascosa, probably all 12 of them, they said, "You just killed our town." And the county said, "Well, you're not totally dead." The Oldham County Schoolhouse that was built in 1885, which right now is the oldest standing adobe schoolhouse in the state of Texas.
Oh.
They put wood siding on it, which no adobe buildings in Tascosa ever had wood siding, just plaster. That's the reason they're all gone now, except the courthouse, which was built out of stone. But the schoolhouse, they put wood siding on, and that schoolhouse operated all the way till 1955. So.
Was it the only schoolhouse in Oldham County still?
Not Oldham County, north of the river.
North of the river. Okay.
Yes.
So all the kids north of the river.
Yeah, there was still school.
attended school.
Yeah, there was still school in Vega. And
Probably for the same reason that they would get there and find out they couldn't cross the river.
Right, right. So most all of the kids that went to school at Tascosa were from north of the river.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the crazy thing is that school was open from 1885 to 1955, 70 years. Only one student ever graduated high school. And it was a school, first through 12th. Only one student ever graduated high school. Because back then, if a kid learned to read, write, a little bit of math, he went back to work on the ranch or the farm.
Go get to work.
Well, the Turner family lived out west of Tascosa. And Roy Turner is the one Boys Ranch bought 3,200 acres from back in 1967. But his older brother, Edward Turner, is the only student to ever graduate from that school with his high school diploma. And that diploma's hanging in the old schoolhouse now.
How funny.
Yeah.
I don't know that you would qualify that as a really successful school.
It did what schools did back then.
Back then,
now,
sure,
if you
yeah.
lived in town, you had town kids. Yeah, they probably went to school till they could graduate high school. But out in the country, those kids were needed back on the ranch or the farm.
Of course. Thank you so much for sharing that. Such a rich, wonderful history.
Well, we do those tours of Boys Ranch and history tours of Old Tascosa. So, and one thing I want everybody to know is that we do thousands of tours. So call ahead, let us know what you want and when you're going to be there. We'll even do tours on the weekends if we get enough notice, because I'm on the road a lot. So, and the other gal that does most of the tours is on the road quite a bit too.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to also spend some time just talking about your experience at Boys Ranch, like present day.
Well, of course, I was the business manager out there until about 2004, and then I became the administrator of campus operations, and campus operations at Boys Ranch is big. You've got farm and ranch. We've got 11,000 acres that we farm and ranch. We've got about 1,000 acres of campus, which is a town in the state of Texas. Boys Ranch is listed as a town. We have our own zip code. We have our own bank or post office. We have a bank too, which is kind of a subsidiary of Amarillo National Bank, where all our kids' checking and savings accounts are held.
Cool.
And then in 2004, I was the administrator of campus operations, which again is farm and ranch. It's also building maintenance and construction, roads and grounds, horticulture.
What's the total acreage out there?
12,000 acres.
Okay.
But it included transportation, custodial, food service, medical service, everything. And a few years after that, I became the vice president of campus operations. And then about 2019, I told him I was going to retire. So we started moving some of those jobs over to other people, and now we've got another vice president of campus operations. But I told him that I'd like, while this was all going on, I'd like to work with development, because I've known most of our donors nationwide for years, because I've visited Boys Ranch, I've toured them, I've known a lot of them for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
And so now what I do is I travel around and I meet with our donors. I'll go talk to foundations. We do what we call coffee and conversations, where we'll set up a place and we just got back from Houston and had a group of donors come in there that had not been to Boys Ranch and wanted to hear more about it. And so we go down and we'll talk for 3 hours about Boys Ranch. And we've got a couple more of those coming up at the end of this month, one in Georgetown and one in Santa Maria, Texas. And it's pretty good. But I travel to California, Florida, and it's all driving, because I'm visiting people all the way. Mm-hmm. Made a trip last summer that went all the way down to El Paso, back over to Southern California, all the way up into Washington.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and back down. It's 5,000 miles, and we visited about 30 sets of donors.
I'd like to ask an intentionally broad question. What service does Boys Ranch provide?
Well, it is, of course, our mission statement says that we're a Christ-centered organization to support families and children and families in crisis. And the kids that come out to Boys Ranch come from all over the United States. And when they come to Boys Ranch, they live at Boys Ranch. We're not short-term. Normally, a kid comes to us, we pretty much expect them to graduate high school with us and then go on to college on our scholarship programs, and they can learn vocations while they're there. Of course, we have our own independent school district, Boys Ranch Independent School District. Then our district is this year it's Hartley, Text Line, because we were 1A. This next year we're probably going to be 2A. So we moved back up because our numbers had dropped during the pandemic, and it's been a while trying to get them back up.
I'm sure.
Not because there's not kids in need, but because we lost a lot of house parents during the pandemic, and trying to get house parents hired has been a real challenge. If anybody's interested in being a house parent, contact Boys Ranch, because the pay is good. You don't pay any utilities or rent, and your housing's all provided, and of course food's provided, and great benefits and everything. But as we get our numbers up in house parents, our numbers are coming back up in kids. So now we're moving back up into 2A.
Nice.
And this year's been a really good year for our kids.
Oh, great.
Our football team went 7-3. Didn't make the playoffs. Went 7-3. But our basketball team made it all the way to regionals. The team that beat us, the Valley Patriots, beat us by 4 points in the last 13 seconds. Oh. And that team went on to win the state championship, and they destroyed everybody after us. Oh. If we could have beat Valley, we could have been state champions in basketball. Oh. And then our cross country team made it to state. We have 9 state titles in cross country. And then our track team we hosted district track, and we won it walking away. We normally do in our district. One act play is advanced now to area, and so everything to do with the school and the kids in UIL and sports has been really good this year. The kids have done well. Our FFA, they've done, we went to the Houston Stock Show, San Antonio Stock Show, Austin Stock Show, and the kids have done well. We've had 4 animals make the sale in Austin and San Antonio, which is, for a little bitty school like us, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so impactful for the kid and the school.
Yes.
So it sounds like, I would assume as well, your graduation rates are a little bit better than that.
Well, they're 100%, unless the legal guardian of the children, which they stay the legal guardian, unless they take them out of the system, they're going to graduate with us.
Yeah. What's the secret to success for intervention in families in crisis that you all have found?
Cal Farley wanted, when he went to Julian Bivens back in 1938, and Cal had been instrumental when he actually started the Maverick Boys Club, and then he helped with other folks start the Kids Inc. And that was to take care of all those kids during the Great Depression that were running the streets, that were just had nothing to do and were getting into trouble. Mm-hmm. Mostly boys. Yeah. In fact, almost all boys back then. He realized there was still about 10% of those kids on the street that Maverick Club and Kids Inc. weren't helping. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to get them out of the city environment, out in the country. So he went to rancher Julian Bivens and he said, Julian, I need a piece. He knew Julian had 100,000 acres. And he said, I need a piece of property that I can go start a boys ranch. There were no boys ranches in the United States. This is the first. Wow. And he said, I want to start a boys ranch. He said, I want to get these kids out of this inner city, out into the country, good food, good work, education, wholesome. Structure. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And Julian loaded him and Chancellor Weymouth and Dutch Mantell into a 36 DeSoto, and here they come, driving out to Old Tascosa, which was on the southwestern corner of the Bivens Ranch. And, of course, they didn't know until they got to the Canadian River if they could even cross it. But they did. They got across. Most of the town was crumbling. Julian Bivens had taken the Oldham County Courthouse that was closed in 1915 and turned that into his western headquarters. He and his wife went in and redid the building and put a kitchen in, put bathrooms in, put a septic system in, water system, and ran natural gas down from Channing. So it was livable. And it had a couple of people who were the ranch foremans out there that were living there, and he took. What year did you say? 38? Late 38. Okay, cool. So he reminding myself. He goes up to Cal Farley. Well, they're standing on the courthouse steps, and they're looking over what's left of the old town of Tascosa. Most of the buildings are falling apart. He said, "What do you think?" Cal says, "Perfect. It's perfect." So they chartered in 1939, March of 1939. Boys Ranch started. Now it wasn't called Cal Farley's Boys Ranch. It was called Maverick Boys Ranch. Cal took the name Maverick from the Maverick Boys Club, and he called it Maverick Boys Ranch. And it stayed Maverick Boys Ranch until the late 40s, and then they decided to call it what they thought it was, which was America's First Boys Ranch. They wanted to have a little bit of salesmanship into the thing. It's America's First Boys. Yeah. Well, then they realized in the early 50s, this is Cal Farley's Boys Ranch.
Aw.
So the name changed to Cal Farley's Boys Ranch.
That's cool.
But Cal Farley's Boys Ranch was only local until 1945. You know why? A reporter from the Saturday Evening Post came to Boys Ranch in 1943, wrote an article called Alley Cowboys. And it's in the Saturday Evening Post. Well, producers in Hollywood with MGM read that and thought, this would make a great movie. They called Cal and said, what do you think? You can make a little money and it'll kind of advertise your business and everything. What do you think about us making a movie called Boys Ranch? Cal said, sounds good. If we can make some money for the kids, that's good.
Oh.
And they made the movie Boys Ranch, and it's owned by Turner Television. It's TCM, Turner Classic
Turner
Movies.
Classics, for sure.
Yep, and it's a pretty decent little movie.
How fun.
But it went nationwide. Well, Cal hadn't been thinking, wait a minute, this thing's going nationwide, this movie is. He'd only been taking kids from the Panhandle.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, he started getting calls from New York, Houston,
Wow.
Miami, Dallas, Los Angeles. People, single moms, 90% of them. I've got a son that's out of control. He's quit school. He's running the streets. And Cal realized real quick he had to go national. So he started going out on the road to civic organizations all over the country and promoting Boys Ranch. And we started taking kids from all over the country. But he really didn't plan on that. That happened because he accepted the movie being made at Boys Ranch.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, when Julian Bivens gave him the original 118 acres, that was the old ghost town of Tascosa, Cal knew that wasn't going to be big enough when all the started. So Dutch Mantell had bought about 760 acres right next to Boys Ranch property and donated it to Cal for Boys Ranch. Cal traded the top 340 acres for 540 acres over here, closer to where the highway now is. There was no highway back then.
Yeah.
And so Boys Ranch at that point was right at 1,200 acres.
Okay.
All right. And then and then Cal had been, Roy Turner, who owned all the property to the west of Boys Ranch, what wound up being across 385, what's now. And Cal just thought, man, we need to be raising our own beef. We need to have the space. We need to be raising hay. He really wanted this property. Well, in 1967, Roy Turner offered it to him for $50 an acre, 3,200 acres. So Cal just sent out a letter to all the donors who had been donating to Boys Ranch and said he'd like to see if they would each donate $50, buy 1 acre each. Not only did they do it, the staff at Boys Ranch got together and bought an acre, and the kids at Boys Ranch bought an acre.
Gosh.
And they bought the 3,200 acre Turner Ranch.
That's lovely.
So from 67 on up to 1983, Boys Ranch was closer to 4,500 acres. Oliver Bivens owned another 6,400 acres north of there. And we had started leasing some of that property from him because our cattle business was really taking off.
Yeah.
And he offered to sell it to us in 1983. And we got everybody together and we bought 6,400 acres. And that put us a little over 10,000 acres, 10,500 acres. Mm-hmm. And since then, we bought a 900 acre piece from Julian Bivens that was across the road, that kind of thing. And we're sitting right at 12,000 acres now. And we farm approximately 400 acres and we raise about 300 to 400 head of cows, calves, and bulls. We're a cow-calf operation, which means we breed and raise the calves. And we move them around section to section on our property to keep our grasses up and everything. And it's been really successful. And we consume about 100 head a year.
Sure. You got to feed those boys, man.
Boys and girls. We went co-ed in 1992.
Yeah.
Yep.
What is your current role out at Boys Ranch?
Development. I travel around and visit with donors, and then I do tours out at Boys Ranch still. And I'm working on the old museum. It's not what the old courthouse is now, the Julian Bivens Museum. The last kids lived in there in 1961. In 65, Cal Farley's son-in-law, Sherm Harriman, started redoing the courthouse and making a museum out of it. And that's what it is now. And I'm working on getting that redone. So I work in there quite a bit.
I'm interested to hear such a rich history, to say the least. What do you see the future of Cal Farley's Boys Ranch being?
Well, it is. It has really started to take off. We're going to fill the ranch up with kids. That's going to happen. But since the pandemic, we have started helping families. Since we couldn't take their kids because we didn't have the house parents, we started helping families where they are. And we've got staff in Amarillo that's what they do. They help families, and we're helping around 600 plus families all over the country, right where they're at. With resources where they're at and whatever we can do. And now, as of April 1st of this year, we are going to be certified as a foster program.
Oh.
We will be able to take children in and put them in Christian foster families that will be vetted by us in the local area right now.
So y'all will be placing.
Yes.
Nice.
It's not going to be CPS. It is going to be Boys Ranch. And we will pick the foster parents and that type of thing. And they'll have to, like I say, they'll be vetted by us. And they'll be from Christian organizations. We've contacted Christian organizations in the Panhandle.
Well, and we know that there's such a need for support in the foster system in the state of Texas.
So Boys Ranch just in the last 4 or 5 years, the pandemic kind of kicked us into gear outside of the ranch, even though the ranch is still going to be a major part of who we are. Totally. In fact, it is who we are. Yeah. Everything else is just gravy, and it's going to be good. It's great for kids, and it's just going to get better.
This episode is sponsored by the Amarillo Art Institute at Arts in the Sunset. If you haven't been, this place is an amazing center for Amarillo's vibrant art scene. They have monthly events, including the First Friday Art Walk, which showcases the artists they have in residence, and there are some incredibly talented people with all sorts of wares and mediums there. They also offer classes for children and adults in things such as glass blowing, weaving, and pottery. All of it really is just so cool. Check them out on Facebook. That's Arts in the Sunset. Okay, I'm back with Mike Pacino. Mike, this is the part of the show that we call 8 Straight. I've got 8 fast ones for you.
Okay.
Okie dokie. When you think of Amarillo 10 years from now, what do you hope for?
I hope for the Panhandle Plains Historical Museum to be moved into the Amarillo area where it's got a population that can support it. I love Canyon. I live in the Canyon area. I've got a home there. But I just don't know if Texas A&M system is not going to be able to support it. It needs to come into a larger metropolitan area where a lot more people can see it and where it can have the space. I really don't want to see artifacts taken out of that museum. I would like it to stay with the museum. So 10 years from now, I would love to see a beautiful museum for the Panhandle Plains Historical Society to put all those artifacts in.
I think you were far from alone in the number of people around here that have a lot of hopes for that museum over the next 10 years. Yeah. When was the last time you went to Paladuro Canyon?
About a year ago.
Okay.
I took one of our elderly donors who'd never been there down, and we toured the Paladuro.
Perfect. Other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
Fire.
Oh. Yeah, we were just talking. You guys had to evacuate not long ago, but you said that fire did not burn onto the ranch this time.
Right, but it smoked us really good while it was going.
Geez. What does this area not have enough of?
Water. And at the rate we're drawing down the Ogallala, and it's not, and even though, Amarillo's 210,000, and it's not the municipal water use, agriculture is using 100 times more water than the municipalities are, and we've got to figure out a way to use a whole lot less water to produce what we produce. Our rainfall is actually dropping the average. The temperature's going up, and we know that. So dryland farming is going to go away, but you've got to have a better way to irrigate your crops than what we're doing now, even though we have done a lot of technology has made it much more efficient, but we've got maybe 40, 50 years left, and then we're going to be in trouble.
What's your favorite local building?
The Paramount. I just love that. And again, we were talking about the movie Boys Ranch. The premiere was at the Paramount, and we've got a picture of the Paramount with people just crowding in to go to see the movie Boys Ranch. That's so cool. Yeah, and to see that put back, and I love it. Yeah. Favorite local restaurant? I got 2. Okay. For Mexican food, I like to go to the Plaza. The Plaza, I love it. There's a lot of good Mexican food in Amarillo. I'm not going to say, but I go to the Plaza. I like the ambiance and the food. And, for being from Texas and everything, I love steak. and we've got a lot of good steakhouses. But for the money, I love Texas Roadhouse.
There you go.
You can get a great steak at the Texas Roadhouse. Now, the Big Texan has wonderful steak.
Yep.
It's not cheap, but it's wonderful.
Yep.
But there's a lot of steakhouses in Amarillo that are good. I've eaten at all of them, and when I'm traveling, I'll take a Texas Roadhouse. You can actually tell them how you want this. You want a steak that's done in butter. You want a steak that's done.
There you go.
You can actually. Most people don't know, but you can specify a lot on your steak before it's ever cooked.
Very nice. Okay, you have 4 hours to spend in Amarillo or the surrounding area with someone who's never been here. What are you doing?
Palo Duro Canyon. Because it's so unique. The first time I drove over to Palo Duro Canyon, I thought, oh my gosh.
I know.
People must have rode right off the cliff when they got here. And of course, you're coming in from east, it's just, you see it come up. But from the west, it's amazing. And of course, when they say it's the second largest canyon in the United States, it's by length and width. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful canyon. And the play Texas, I love. I love that play. But I would take them to Palo Duro Canyon. Can I tell you where I wouldn't take them?
Oh, please. That one's, I like it.
Cadillac Ranch.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to tell you, people come from the west. The first, and it's on their bucket list because everybody's going to stop at the Cadillac Ranch. And they get there, and it doesn't look anything like it did when it was started. It was gorgeous when the original Cadillacs were put there. They had the glass in them, their paint on them, and the wheels and tires were on them.
Yeah.
By the mid-'80s, it started looking rough, and people started painting on them. And now, if you're from California and you stop there, that's your first bucket list stop coming into Texas. What are you thinking about Amarillo? Because that's a big deal on the travel guide.
It is.
And yet it's junk. I would love it if they'd go back in and put some good Cadillacs in there, put a little fence around them so people can't put paint on.
So you would not be you don't want people to be able to paint on them? No. Okay.
I want them to see the original idea was so pretty and it was so unique, just out in the middle of nowhere. Here's these Cadillacs nose down. It was like an art piece. We actually had an artist that was raised in Texas. She's got a gallery in Dallas, and she painted the Cadillacs with a huge sky as she remembered from when she was a child, and she donated that painting to Boys Ranch. It's hanging in but it has the Cadillacs as they were. Now, they're real small on the painting with a huge sky and everything, but it's gorgeous, and it's an art piece. It's not an art piece anymore.
You are not the first person I've talked to that has said that they wish that Cadillac Ranch was as it was originally intended.
And protect it a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love people to be able to go right up to it, but not paint on it, not cut the tires, not break the glass,
Yeah. Okay, what do you think people get wrong about Amarillo?
Well, all the people I know, the East Coast, West Coast, they think it's a dusty little cow town. Now, it is a cow town. We got a lot of agriculture around here.
And it is dusty.
And it is dusty. But their view of Amarillo now, believe it or not, is from the movie Yellowstone, the series.
Yep.
And I don't know how many people I've talked to and said, that isn't us. Most of these ranches around here are run by Christian people. They don't drop F-bombs. They don't swear at everything. And they don't try to kill their neighbors. But that's the view they're getting now.
Sure.
And because those were huge, that series was huge for those people. And I said, that's not the West I know at all. So that's kind of the view they have. Everything around us would be like Yellowstone, and then Amarillo is just a dusty little cow town. That's what they get wrong.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that concludes 8 Straight. I like to end my episodes by offering my guests the opportunity to endorse something. If it's something that a listener doesn't know about, hadn't tried, that you would endorse, what would that be?
Well, other than Boys Ranch, which I'm going to tell you, we used to be on the Texas Tour Route. I think we still are. Buses come in, they come into Amarillo. They're they come in from Houston. They're here for several days. They'll do the Palo Duro Canyon, usually the Play Texas. It's always in the summer. They'll go to the Big Texan.
Yep.
They will go to the Discovery Center. They come to Boys Ranch, and we do a tour. They eat lunch with us and the kids. So, that I'd love to. Of course, I want to endorse and I want to have support for the Panhandle Plains Museum. Again, that's That's huge.
It is.
That really is. That's the largest historical museum in the state of Texas, and it's been closed for a year.
Yeah, I think following a conversation that is centered in the absolute richness of the history, just in the Panhandle,
Yeah.
to not have public access to the largest collection of it is very sad.
It is. And then the other thing I'd like to endorse is Route 66.
There you go.
I was part of the founding member and president of the Oldham County Chamber of Commerce. Of course, we actually put on in Oldham County the first international Route 66 gathering.
Oh, fun.
Now they do it every year.
And it's certainly relevant this summer.
Yes, with a 100-year anniversary of Route
Totally.
66. So supporting the businesses and the towns up and down Route 66 in Texas is huge. Vega, Adrian, between Vega and Adrian is Landergen. And that's where we did the international. Now Landergen's, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But in Adrian, you have the Midpoint Cafe. It's 1,137 miles to Chicago and 1,137 miles to Santa Monica. Dead center, the Adrian Midpoint Cafe. And that's a wonderful place. It's open all during the summer. In fact, I think it's open now. And great pies. The ladies over there, they take care of a lot of people. A lot of motorcycle clubs come through in the summer. People from Germany and Japan and France and England. It's huge, and they stop in there. So you'd be missing something if you bypass that place.
Yeah.
But even Vega with the downtown stuff that they've done, and Shamrock and Amarillo, of course. But all these towns have a piece of that Route 66 history that's wonderful.
Yeah. I think very, very worth noting that Amarillo is celebrating it, but so are a whole lot of other communities, neighbor communities.
Right.
Mike, thanks so much for recording. This has been a delight, and I appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge of
I
this.
appreciate
this
you
place.
asking me. This is a wonderful place to live. I still go back to Northern California all the time to visit family, and I do a lot when I'm visiting donors, but I don't feel like I'm home until I've crossed that New Mexico line and seen the first little hill of the Llano Estacado, and that's home.
Amen. And that concludes the episode. Thanks to Mike for the interview. Thank you to the Amarillo Art Institute and SKP Creative for supporting the podcast, and to Broderick Adams for editing every week. And thank you for listening. This has been episode 455 of Hey Amarillo. I'm Skylar Gallup, and we hope you'll come back next week.